Okay, good morning, Nick. My name's Callum, and I'm one of the WreckSploration team. And thanks for the opportunity to talk about this on your podcast.
Good morning, I'm Aberle-Leeming. I'm another member of the WreckSploration team. So between us, we're 40% of the team of five. Really excited to jump on the pod this morning and tell you a bit more about what we're doing.
Off-Gassing, a scuba podcast with host Nick Hogel. When did it sink? How did it sink? Where was it built? When was it built? Were lives lost? Behind every unidentified shipwreck is a story waiting to be told. In this episode, I speak with Callum Girvan and Aberle-Leeming, two members of WreckSploration, a team of divers based out of Western Australia with a goal to explore, preserve, educate, and promote a culture of safety in the technical diving community. I speak with them about photogrammetry, the abundance of shipwrecks around Perth, the process of identifying a wreck, the importance of creating a role model behavior with their local diving community, their work with human factors in diving, and much more. Please enjoy. Good morning to you today. I am here with WreckSploration, and I'm excited to speak about the projects that they have going on. So if you guys could just introduce yourselves really quickly, and then we'll go a little bit more about the projects that you are doing.
Okay, good morning, Nick. My name's Callum, and I'm one of the WreckSploration team. And thanks for the opportunity to talk about this on your podcast.
Good morning, I'm Aberle-Leeming. I'm another member of the WreckSploration team. So between us, we're 40% of the team of five. Really excited to jump on the pod this morning and tell you a bit more about what we're doing.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I'm very excited. So just a quick background for me. I am just starting to kind of get into the wreck side of things. So that's why I'm really excited to speak to you. I actually went out to Subic Bay in the Philippines to I did an advanced wreck course. So we did some penetration, line laying, just some skills. So I'm very excited to hear about the wrecks that you have in your area. Tell me about how and why you got into scuba diving. Tell me about that first breath underwater. What led to it? Was it love at first breath? Was it I hate this, I'm never doing this again? What was it like? So I guess we'll start with you, Callum.
Okay, well, I blame my friend, a good mate of mine called Terry in the UK. We used to work together at Mars Confectionery in England. We were single shift managers at the time, and Terry said, "Oh, let's go to Borneo for a holiday." And I said, "Sure, why not?" And we booked it, and Terry was a diver with Nowie at the time, and about 3 weeks before we were going, Terry said, "Oh, we're going to go diving, right?" And I wasn't a diver. And I said, "Oh, do I really?" And I'm like, he's like, "Yeah, we're going to go diving. There's a place over there called Sipadan." And this was in the early 90s. And there's a place over there called Sipadan. It's amazing. You got to learn to dive. So I couldn't get on a course in London, which is near where I was living. So I ended up going to Portsmouth and learning to dive in Portsmouth, which, if anybody's had that experience, is a pretty traumatic one in terms of visibility, temperature. And I did that course, and it was, I got through it, let's say. And then I went to Sipadan as my next dive in the 90s. Borneo divers, I think they were the only operation on the island, and we were staying on the island at the time, not like it is now. And I was completely spoiled. I couldn't believe, I didn't know what I was looking at. I was looking at some amazing world-class diving. Little did I know that that was possibly one of the best diving experiences I'd ever had in terms of visibility, fish diversity, amazing experience. And that just sucked me in. And the rest is kind of history. I suppose the rest is a series of right place, right time, or wrong place, wrong time. But that steered the rest of my... Within 6 months, I had left my career job and I'd moved to Egypt, become a dive instructor. Not a dive instructor, a dive master. Served my time, done my dive instructor, and my career changed from there.
You've never had a real job again?
Never had a real job.
Very lucky for some. So my journey started out, I was living in Canberra at the time, which for anyone that's ever been to Canberra or knows much about Australia, Canberra is our landlocked capital. So it's not really a great place to learn to dive. But I decided to get into diving because my father's been diving since about the 1970s. He always really enjoyed it. And I thought, as happens for a lot of us, we're inspired by the people closest to us, around us. And I decided to get into that in my early 20s. So in Canberra, I went and found a dive shop. And so the guys at In-Depth Scuba over in Canberra, absolutely great crew of people. And a lot of the same people are still there, still doing amazing stuff and are running a really, really active community for scuba diving, even though it's a landlocked city. So we would drive a couple of hours down to the coast, and I did my first kind of few courses there, open water. I actually did a side mount course very, very early on, advanced rec, a few other things like that, and eventually did a dive master traineeship with them, which was great. Really, really good experience. And at that point, I sort of thought, well, what next? I'm a big fan of taking hobbies and really pursuing them to the fullest extent that they maintain my interest. So for me, that meant looking at technical diving. So the In-Depth team were running a trip to South Australia, to Mount Gambier, which is one of the two kind of premier cave diving destinations in Australia, and certainly one of the best in the world. So we went down there and I did my first cave course, which was fun. And I thought, all right, I like this technical diving thing. I really enjoy the equipment aspect. I enjoy what my wife calls all the faff, messing around with gear and all the extra stuff that you've got to take. But I think the thing that I enjoyed about it the most, and the thing that I continue to really enjoy, is the standard that it holds you accountable to. So, I talk about open water diving as like driving a car, and technical and cave diving as like, competing in motorsport. Like there are four wheels and a steering wheel, and, you're still driving a car the same way. But other than that, it's completely different. The stakes are very different. Things can go wrong very quickly, and they can go wrong in a much more spectacular and sometimes quite scary fashion very, very quickly. So I enjoyed the fact that that additional risk meant holding myself to a higher standard. And it's meant that I've got to dive with some really incredible people, get instruction from some incredible people like Callum, for example. But yeah, getting into cave diving initially was sort of what got me into tech. And then a few years later, a little bit more cave diving when I moved back to Western Australia. And then I got into rebreathers. That's kind of where I'm at now is more and more time on rebreathers, more ocean diving, and really, really enjoying that part of the journey. For the same sort of reasons.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I'm actually really excited because, like I was saying, I did the advanced rec course, and definitely that was kind of my introduction into the overhead environment. And I'm actually headed to Mexico in May of this year to start. I would say start my true overhead journey, because I'm doing my cavern, my intro to cave, and then depending on how that goes, full cave. So, and then rebreathers is something that I'm kind of looking at too, just because I feel like with this day and age, helium, open circuit, just lots of dollar signs. I mean, either way, it's lots of dollar signs, regardless, kind of getting into the sport. But no, that's awesome. So you were saying that you're 40% of the WreckSploration team. So there's a total of 6 people?
Yes, there are 5 of us. Yeah, so there's the 2 of us, Andy Oakley, Gareth Glasgow, and Martin Bovington. So we and together we fulfil different roles within the team. We've got a really good set of complementary skill sets, and we all dive together and carry out these missions as the WreckSploration team together.
Yeah, I think as Alex says, we've kind of happened on it in a way that through rebreather training. We become rebreather divers, and we practice together. We go diving together. We go on holiday together, or let's say wreck trips together. We've been to Bikini recently as a group, honing our skills and enjoying ourselves. And I think there came a point at which Alex will probably talk about where WreckSploration was born from. But basically, having these skills, it's all very well doing these dives, but there was something kind of missing in terms of objectives. It's all very well going down there and going, oh, there's the wreck, that's great. But this WreckSploration project, if you like, or team, has borne a number of things which has been reasons to go diving, and there are some massive positives to that, which Alex will mention. But it also sets some role model behaviour within our diving community in Perth in terms of our procedures and protocols, which, if that's of interest, we can talk about.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. I guess my first question is, so did you all just kind of meet, I'm assuming through scuba, just like, oh, hey, I need a good teammate, seeing this person, he's a good diver, let's bring him into the crew. Kind of how did all that come about? How did you guys all meet initially?
Well, I can certainly talk to the start of WreckSploration itself, the genesis of that idea and the formation of this team. And I definitely throw to Callum after that to talk a bit more about the broader community that we built in Perth. We've got a very special tech diving community in Perth, which I think is just wonderful. But the idea of WreckSploration started. Andy and I were at, in fact, you were at the conference as well, Callum. We were at Oztech at the end of 2022. So Oztech is a technical diving conference, which I'm sure you've heard about. Absolutely incredible opportunity for people that are interested in technical diving, even if you're not a technical diver yet, even if you're considering getting into tech diving, you want to meet more people, talk about tech diving, hear from some of the best in the business, as it were. You've had, say, Simon Mitchell on this podcast before. He was a presenter at the Oztech that we're at, did a fantastic presentation on in-water recompression. So there's a lot of opportunities to build your network in technical diving. But one of the presentations that Andy and I saw was from the Major Projects Foundation, and they're doing some great work in the Pacific around using photogrammetry to image shipwrecks to work out how much oil's left in them, because that obviously causes an environmental problem as the shipwrecks degrade. So they're doing some work to look at estimating how much oil is in there so that they can pump it out. And we looked at that and thought, well, we've got a heap of shipwrecks off Perth. Granted, they were all scuttled, so they're not leaking oil. But a lot of them are unidentified. And wouldn't it be a great idea to take this photogrammetry technology, these techniques, and use that to image these shipwrecks and bring them to the community that may never get the opportunity to see them? So it was really, for us, it was about an intersection point of a small group of people that have a specialized set of skills around really deep diving, bringing in the photogrammetry and building out techniques and equipment that sits at that intersection point that lets us do what we do. Then partnering with the likes of the West Australian Shipwreck Museum, as well as a number of other private enthusiasts that have got a lot of great knowledge to identify these shipwrecks, to help preserve them. And so the genesis of what is now WreckSploration was explore, preserve, educate. That's kind of our tagline, and doing it safely. So the idea is we look at these shipwrecks, we help identify them. By capturing that point in time, we can look at how they're degrading over time. We can look at potentially how they sank. Some of the other projects that we're looking at, there's more of an unknown around that sort of piece, around how they sank. So building up a body of knowledge around that and around educating the community. So podcasts like yours are a great opportunity for us to do that. We've done some presentations in schools, as well as presentations to different enthusiast groups in WA. So that's the educational piece. And the doing it safely tagline is about encouraging safety in the tech diving community. And Callum, do you want to talk a bit more about what you've done to help build that community in Perth?
Sure. I can't speak to it being my sole role, but I run a dive shop in Perth. My passion certainly latterly has been rebreathers and rebreather education and training people. That's led to really the key to rebreather diving is checklists, protocols, and the rigidity around that. There's no room for complacency or skipping those steps, and we're just trying to create a culture within the community that is supported by the community to have consistent behaviours around pre-dive checks and diving with rebreathers, because that's where the issues are. And so the WreckSploration team, which is not part of my business, my dive business, I'm a member of it, is a great way of that role model behaviour. So we have our specific checklists that then trickle down to the checklists that I use in my training, that aren't unique. Everyone has them across the world, but we just use them in this environment to our advantage. And they've also trickled down into our open circuit tech training and regular diving. By no means do I claim that as my achievement, but it's certainly something that we support. And it also means that people have a structure within which they can behave safely. We have an amazing community in Perth. For certainly, we're like the most isolated city in the world. But Singapore's nearer than Sydney. But we seem to be able to. We punch above our weights in terms of per capita rebreathers per capita. Yeah. Per capita, we have a really high uptake. It's still a niche, of course, but we have a high uptake of rebreather divers, and I'm not talking unit specific. I'm talking about general rebreathers, and that's a great opportunity for such an isolated part of the world to make a mark, make a difference, set a standard. It's an easily influenceable thing, if that's a word, influenceable, because we haven't got so much people movement, and we welcome new people coming in from the East Coast all the time. That's a massive benefit of the WreckSploration project.
Just to build on that, I think we're incredibly lucky in Western Australia, and as a proud West Australian, shameless plug for Western Australia in general, I think we're incredibly lucky to have. I mean, we have 2.5 million people in a state 3 times the size of Texas, right? So very low population density, an incredible coastline with a warm current that flows down from the tropics, the Lewin Current. So at the same latitude on the East Coast, there's a lot less life and growth compared to what we have in Western Australia. World-class reef diving, obviously some amazing shipwrecks, which is the stuff we're interested in, as well as the Nullarbor Plain, which is certainly an area that's very special to me around cave diving. Callum's not so into that stuff. He can't see what all the fuss is about, but I really, really love getting out on the Nullarbor, and that's still an area that's being explored as well. So we're really lucky in Western Australia to have the diving that we have. Some of it's pretty hardcore, but we're really lucky to have it.
We are, but it's not that nice. We don't think that people should be flooding here and taking it up too much. Yeah, don't get overexcited. It's not that nice.
All right.
It's our best kept secret.
Oh, okay. So incorporating the safety within the community, you started doing some work with human factors and diving?
Yeah.
We did, indeed. Nice segue there. Not that we pre-planned that, yeah. Of course. Yes, that was a trickle down also. One of our members, Gareth Glasgow, not Gareth Locke, Gareth Glasgow in the team has always been an advocate of this through Mark Crane. I think you know Mark Crane. He's been on your podcast. Yeah. So Mark has historically incorporated human factors into his training in Bali, and that has influenced divers here in Perth. Gareth being one of our members, and that has made us look at human factors as a dive shop and as a team. And as you'll note from our website, wrecksploration.au, that shameless plug, that we're strong supporters and advocates of those programs. We've had Mike Mason over, Mike Mason, who works with Gareth. He's the trainer for Australia, I think, for human factors. He's been over and run a couple of courses for us, and he's going to come over again. We actually encourage all our members to, because people can be members of WreckSploration, to undertake the Essentials course, which is an online program, which speaks to the risk management and attitude towards safety.
And I think it's been really well received. That's the other thing that I find really really heartening is that, when we're on the boat going through checklists, asking each other questions that if you looked at us, you'd go, seriously? Like, you guys look like you know what you're doing. Why are you asking each other to, show me where your backup mask is. Show me that you've got, show me what pressure is in your bailout cylinder. Stuff that I think the divers get, particularly as they get more experience, they get used to kind of being very self-reliant and checking this stuff off themselves. So for us, there's a bit of an adjustment. I think for a lot of tech divers, there's an adjustment when you get to that next level of risk around things like rebreathers, doing some of the dives that we're doing off the back of Rottnest that do carry a lot of risk, is taking it all the way back to basics and going, show me that you've set the correct gas. And then I'll show you that I've set the correct gas that we've, that we've analyzed. We checked that it matches cylinders. So just going through all of that sort of stuff. I mean, almost like, checklists like that are very common in things like aviation, like high risk environments. But it's been really, really well received by the community. So we don't get funny looks or odd comments on dive boats. We get people going, wow, that's really interesting. Like, those guys are really on top of what they're doing, very polished. Like, people are taking notice of it, and that is having an impact on other people in diving in the community. So it's a fantastic outcome so far.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. I was actually just having a conversation with somebody too, and I was saying, I'm like, I don't really know how or when I came across it. I think it's just something that's there, the human factors in diving. But once you start reading it all, it really does just make sense. And to me, someone that incorporates it, when I see an instructor, if I'm going towards an instructor, like, hey, I might want to take a class from you, let's chat. And if I see that they incorporate it into their program, it's more welcoming for me to want to go in there, because I know that they're taking their training seriously or their instruction more seriously. And yes, that's actually, so I've taken a course with Mark and definitely plan on taking more courses with him in the future, but I like how he incorporates that. So seeing other organizations and groups incorporating it more, I really do think it's a positive that needs to get out there more in the community. But just a quick question, just because we're here about wrecks, why are there so many wrecks in the Perth area?
That's a fantastic question, and is probably some important context to our mission as it currently stands. So, off the back of Rottnest Island. So Rottnest Island is 10 nautical miles, so about 20 k's off, and I think that would be about 12 or 13 American miles. So we've covered all bases. I don't know what it is in furlongs, so don't ask me that. But it's just off the coast of Western Australia, so it's sort of a half an hour boat ride away. Once you go off the back of Rottnest, that's where the water starts to get much, much deeper. And a few, probably 30 or 40 miles out, I'd say, we're at sort of 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 meters kind of thing. So it does drop off very deeply.
Continental shelf.
Yeah, it drops off the continental shelf quite quickly after Rottnest. So there's a deep area off the back of Rottnest just before that really big drop off that was essentially designated by the Commonwealth government as sort of a rubbish bin for disused ships. So between 1910 and 1994, there were 47 ships scuttled out there, and they varied in size from quite small sort of fishing boats to larger ex-Navy vessels, right up to, the Girvan's probably the largest one, which would be 100, 150 meters long, so like a sizable warship. There are a variety of wrecks out there, but a lot of the records that were kept when these ships were scuttled were quite poor. So we often know that there is a wreck there, and there is a good record of where there are shipwrecks on the bottom, but they're often not identified. So that's the sort of core focus of our mission is identifying and modelling a lot of these shipwrecks.
It's probably so many why there because Fremantle Harbour is there, and everyone's probably heard of Fremantle, and there's a naval base at Garden Island. So with those two centres, there was obviously ships, hulks, maritime, exactly. So that's why they are in that area, and they were used for target practice by the Navy as well as just scuttle, and so quite interesting. And dive really, the shallowest wreck out there is at 58 meters.
Yeah.
The deepest is the Derwent, which Alex already mentioned, the sister ship of the Swan, HMS Swan wreck, which is a dive wreck off Dunsborough. The Derwent sits in 200 meters. It's right on the edge. The story goes they were towing it out there, and I think they thought, this will be deep, and 200 meters, this will be deep enough. Nobody's ever going to dive that.
Yeah.
Well, lo and behold, along comes the wet mules a few years ago.
20, well, it was 11 years ago, I think they did that.
Okay.
There
hasn't been dived since.
Three of them that dived it.
Yeah, and so it has been dived, which is amusing. But we're a bit shallower than that. We have different challenges which preclude us diving there at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a deep dive for sure. But I love that. It's just like, nobody will dive this. Somebody usually finds a way.
Exactly. Yes.
So you stumble upon, or you come across a wreck. It's identified. Take me through the process of, because one of the things I love hearing is when the research behind it. But you come across the wreck, it's identified. Take me through the process of the photogrammetry, what is being done to try to get information to identify the wreck. I'm sure there's steps going in there, and then all the way to now we figured it out and we're presenting it.
So, look, great question. And there are a lot of parts to that, as you can imagine. So, starting off with the identification of the sites, we're really lucky in Perth. We've got Luke, who runs Image Dive, which is the dive boat that we primarily use, has a lot of his own intellectual property around different sites that he's found with sonar out off the back of Rottnest. And the WA Shipwrecks Museum, of course, have a huge database of different sites, which, like any museum, there are some sites where they can look at it and go, that is without a doubt that shipwreck. We know that was sunk there and there's nothing else around it. There are others where we know there's a shipwreck there approximately this length, but we have no information other than that. And there are other sites where it could be one of four different vessels that are on record. So we work with the team at the WA Shipwreck Museum to get sort of a priority hit list. So, if we were to go out to do a dive at approximately this depth, there's, you've got 10 or 20 sites in your database. Which ones are a priority for you? And we can then use that to make sure that the dives that we're doing are on sites where we're likely to return something of value. So Ross, Deb, Kariley at the Shipwrecks Museum are incredibly helpful in that regard. They've been really good at giving us a bit of information about these different shipwrecks, and then also processing the information when we return with the models. So once we've identified a site, we plan around weather windows. So we get a fairly limited number of weather windows because of how exposed the sites are. We have to have really perfect weather conditions. We can't just decide on a random Saturday because that's convenient for everyone that we can go out there. So we've got to line up really, really good weather windows. We try and have a few days beforehand a fairly calm weather as well. We want to do the best we can around visibility and current, which is a big risk factor for us out there as well. But once we've selected the site, we go out. Luke, who runs Images, is prodigally good at dropping shot lines and landing them absolutely bang on, which is kind of like playing darts with 2 meter long steel drill rods through the water from 100 meters away. And he's brilliantly good at doing that. So he'll drop a shot line, which gives us a reference point for descent. We descend down and then we'll take the time. Bottom time is usually sort of between, depending on depth, sort of between 14 and maybe 25 minutes. And we'll collect the data and then go through decompression. As far as the photogrammetric process, so photogrammetry, which is something we've mentioned a few times over the last kind of 20 minutes, but probably haven't explained, is photogrammetry describes the process of using photographs to measure something or create a model. So there are actually references to the sort of techniques that we use, obviously without the digital side, that go back a very long time. And they all center around the use of perspective and trigonometry. So what we're kind of doing is the reverse of taking a photo. So when you take a photo with your phone or with a camera, you're making a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional object. What we're doing is using those two-dimensional representations to synthesize a three-dimensional model. And the way that works, and look, there's a lot of, if you just type into Google, how does photogrammetry work, if that's something your listeners are interested in, I highly encourage it. There's a lot of really good articles out there. But at its core, what it does is essentially it does the same thing that your eyes do to give you perspective. So the reason you can throw and catch a ball and that you have perspective on distance is because your eyes produce two almost completely overlapping images from a slightly different reference point. And that's what we're doing with the camera. As we move along underwater, the camera moves, which provides a different reference point. So it's almost as if each of those images is an eye, and then the computer model, the software package that we use, is doing all the fancy reverse trigonometry, finding all of the common points in those images, and then working out what the perspective looks like, exactly where the image was taken from relative to the object, and then giving us something that we can turn into a meaningful 3D model. So it basically goes through, finds all the points, turns them into a point cloud, which represented kind of looks like a shadow. It then joins all those points together and turns it into a wireframe, which if you've ever seen docos on animation and that sort of thing, that's kind of the skeleton of it, if you like. And then it will skin that wireframe with the contents of all of the images. So that gives us color, that gives us some of the shadowing, it gives us a few of those other bits and pieces that we need to make it a meaningful model. And one of the really critical things is that we have a scale bar, right? So if you just build that model out, well, it could be this big or it could be a kilometer long. Without a reference point, we don't know how big it is, and that's a really important part of identifying these wrecks, is having a scale for the shipwreck itself, the model. So we take down a meter long piece of aluminium or aluminum, and that's got coloured kind of shaded notches on it. So we can really easily see that in the model, and we then use that to calibrate the final model for length. So we can tell usually with a couple of meters of accuracy how long a shipwreck is, and that then gives us a great ability to be able to go, well, it definitely wasn't this shipwreck, and it could be one of these two, sort of thing, right? Using underwater scooters, we've built special photography and lighting rigs to be able to do this. So we use GoPros in really deep water billeted aluminium housings with really bright video lights. So it's essentially kind of like a crossbar setup. So we're flooding the subject area with a lot of video light, and then we capture about 2 images a second. And at the pace that we move along underwater, that gives us a really good overlap. We're aiming for about 80% overlap to be able to turn it into a good model. And we also run a backup camera running straight video as we run along. And that gives us the ability to review the footage and get a slightly different perspective on certain elements of the model if one of the researchers or someone wants to have a look at it, to look at particular features. And it also gives us a backup. If we have a camera failure, we can still pull stills out and use that to produce a model.
But basically, we then give the model to the museum, and they will compare it to their database, and they do a lot of the donkey work as well, in terms of, especially Ross, I think, in terms of comparing. So the features of the wrecks, the length is critical. I'm learning stuff about, I wouldn't say I'm a marine archaeologist by any stretch at all, or ever will be, but apparently there are certain aspects of ships that are really critical to its identification, of which I can't remember. Something to do with the mast. So definitely like the mast and how many masts, how many levels. Now I'm talking about this where the anchor goes through the
hawse pipe.
Thank you, the hawse pipe. The things that can tell a wreck just from that feature. So Ross does that, and we've been successful as a group, and that's everybody we've been mentioning, in positively identifying wrecks that we weren't sure which wreck was which. So we knew that there were wrecks, but we didn't know which was which. So we've been able to say, no, this is definitely the Junie, and this is definitely the Cape Otway, for example. But recently, just before Christmas, we did an unknown wreck, and that has been positively identified only just like before Christmas, a few days, which is fantastic. I mean, that was our first positive identification from an unknown. So that's really exciting. And more of that, hopefully, to come.
Yeah, the museum team are just fantastic. And they're very, Ross, Deb, Corriley, they've been super generous in not only doing the hard work from an academic perspective and from that subject matter expert perspective. They've been really generous with the way they share that with us. Like they're really keen to educate us, which also means that they come back with that we can come back with better quality models because we know what to look for underwater and areas to go, oh, wait, we better make sure we capture that. That could be really important. And I think the other aspect, and it would be seriously remiss of me not to mention Patrick in our discussions of photogrammetry. So all of the knowledge that we have of photogrammetry was taught to us by Patrick Morrison, who is a lecturer and researcher at the University of Western Australia in maritime archaeology. He has been incredibly generous with his time, not just time sitting around talking us through the theory of it, but time actually getting us in the water, building photogrammetry models with him and giving us tips on how to configure our equipment, what these different camera rigs should look like, that sort of stuff. He's been an incredible supporter, both here as well as at things like the Institute of Maritime Archaeology conference, which we presented our work at late last year. We would be nowhere near where we are today without the help of Patrick. So, yeah, massive shout out to Patrick.
Awesome. No, and it really is, as just somebody sitting on the surface on my computer sometimes, it really is amazing to see some of this imagery come through, just because it's like, obviously I'm not down there, so I can't see it, but then you can really get a good idea and a good scale of what you're looking at. And it's this really cool technology just to kind of bring and show this sort of stuff to a community that is not going to be able to go and do that dive, or they're on the other side of the world. So no, it's great work, and I applaud you for doing it. Is there a wreck or a project that you guys have in store for this year? Like, what do you have going on for 24? Is there something like, oh, we really want to make it out here? And if it's a hush thing, I apologize for mentioning it.
No, there's certainly a few things, and we really feel like we're just getting started. I mean, continuing what we're doing out the back of Rottnest, gradually as we hone our techniques, we get more efficient. The Maritime Archaeology, the Australasian Institute for Maritime Archaeology, which is a bit of a mouthful, the researchers that we met with at that conference were really impressed with how efficiently we could collect data. So with how precise of a model we were able to produce in a very, very limited 14-minute bottom time in that particular example. We're keen to sort of further hone that, be able to go and do deeper dives that require less bottom time, even more deco. But we're also looking a bit more broadly at where we can bring our skills to bear. Remembering, obviously, that this started because we had a skill set and we found photogrammetry of wrecks as a job that we could help with, meaningfully contribute to. We're also looking at working with the likes of Patrick and Mick O'Leary, who works with Patrick as well, on how we can help with capturing submerged landscapes. So there's a potential for us to be able to contribute to the preservation of Indigenous heritage, as well as help with imaging or a collection of samples from shipwrecks elsewhere in Australia that have significant academic value. So we're working with a number of groups on that.
Going forward, the submerged landscape opportunities are huge for cultural and Indigenous reasons here, and we are in a. I mean, our specialty really is. I mean, out there in terms of photogrammetry, there are amazing practitioners. Becky, I can't remember her name, Regan Scott, is it?
Doing the shipwrecks in the Great Lakes.
Great Lakes and major projects. Pete Mesley, they do amazing stuff. I think maybe our point of difference is that we forced to, through depth, through where the location of the wrecks are on the west side of Rottnest. They're from 58 to 200 metres, so most of them are in that sort of 60, 70, 80, 90, 120 metre range. We have to go to those depths to do the work on those wrecks. If they were shallower, we wouldn't be going so deep. So it just happens that we have to do that, which means that our point of difference is that the wrecks we are doing are deeper. So we have less time, of a time window. So our images, our results are not as defined as some of the other guys doing. There's amazing stuff, but we're doing enough to be able to identify wrecks because we run 2 rigs at the same time to capture that data. And it's a challenge in that respect.
If I want to get a hold of WreckSploration, how am I getting a hold of you? Who am I calling? Who am I emailing? Obviously, there's the website, but how do I get a hold of you to work on a potential project?
Look, info@wrecksploration.au is the best contact by email. Hit us up on all the socials is fine. And obviously having a look at the website as well. And on that note, as far as websites are concerned, we would be seriously impossible for us to have done what we've done, not only with the help of the museum and people like Patrick, but also with sponsors. We've had really, really generous community support. So CD Dodd, Mondo, My Place, Advantage Air, Westralian. So West Australian businesses that are supporting a project in Western Australia. It's been really fantastic, this outpouring of community support. And recently we also had a grant from the Heritage Council of Western Australia, and that was specifically for the preservation of our maritime history off the back of Rottnest. So it's great to have their support as well. Just been absolutely outstanding, and it's made it possible because these missions get quite expensive. I mean, we've obviously poured a lot of our own time and personally owned equipment into it. But, just getting out there to do these dives, the gas costs, the consumables costs, the cost of getting the boat out there really mounts up. And we've got a lot of shipwrecks to get through.
My last questions for you, and this will be a question for each of you. Usually I try to end it off with an advice question. So, Callum, advice for somebody that is about to venture into the scuba diving world in the Portsmouth area. What advice would you have for them? You were saying it was kind of a unique perspective going into it, so I'm sure it's cold water, not
No, is that where Mark Crane started as well?
I don't know. That would explain a lot.
About you, about him, or about both? Yeah.
Yes, I would say probably don't do it, but that would be disrespectful to the UK divers. They're a special breed, and the diving in the UK, in my experience, can be, which is brief, by the way, can be you have to dive a lot, but occasionally you'll get an absolutely awesome dive. And it means that the UK divers tend to be pretty squared away in terms of their skills.
Yeah, but there's definitely value in training in harsh environments, in all seriousness.
Absolutely. My general advice is for people to take their journey slowly. It's not a rush. Interview your instructor going forward, especially the deeper, excuse the pun, you get into it in terms of tech and rebreathers. Just take the journey slowly and follow procedures, follow protocols.
My perspective on what to do, I mean, training has been such an important part of my journey, both training in a formal sense, but also making sure you align yourself to divers with more experience and skills than you. I've been really, really fortunate on my journey, both in a rebreather diving context as well as a cave context, that I've always been able to find people that have got much more experience than I do, and being able to learn from them and being really humble on that journey, and not just humble with people that are more experienced than you, but also really humble with your peers. So we're really big in the WreckSploration team on a no blame culture. Everyone makes mistakes and that's fine, but we need to learn from them as a group. And we've seen really experienced divers make silly mistakes, and we've all learned from that as a group, right? So that's really important. So staying humble. And I think the other one, it's not just about saying yes, because opportunities will present themselves. Like having being over at Oztech and going, gee, wouldn't it be cool to do some photogrammetry in Perth? Being able to say yes to that is great, but then following it through. Because the great thing about diving is because it's chiefly, commercial diving aside, diving is a passion for most people that you meet in diving. And it's really easy to get people on the bandwagon when you have an idea. So saying yes and then following it through and bringing other people along for the journey, that's how we got WreckSploration off the ground. And I think there are so many great projects out there in every style of diving, that there is an appetite for people to pursue. So I think it's great. I think it's great when people do that, and we need to see more and more of it.
Awesome. No, this has been absolutely amazing. I really want to thank you guys for coming on to the podcast, and I hope to be able to make it. So I've not been to Australia. I've been meaning to make it down there, and the more that I speak to people and interview people from down there, I'm like, man, I really need to make it down there. So hopefully one of these days I don't know if I'll be hitting the 100-meter wreck yet. I think there's some ways to go before I get there, but it would be great to just kind of come and visit and check out your area. But once again, I really appreciate you guys coming onto the podcast. It was great to hear more about what you have going on. And yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Nick, thanks for your time and the opportunity for us to talk a little bit about this. And I know you give up a lot of your time to do these podcasts, so we appreciate it, the opportunity. And if you're ever in Perth, you come and see us.
Let us know and we'll take you out. Yeah. And thank you. Just on the topic of the podcast, it occurred to me just as Callum was talking, your podcast is a perfect example of having an idea, saying yes to it, and then pursuing it. So kudos to you. Good on you for doing it. Good on you for helping keep our community alive. It's great.
Offgassing, a scuba podcast.